They didn't scream or run. Folks in Coyote Bend just stood and watched the side barn burn. The beam held the glow like a fresh brand. Nora, not paint, knife cut, meant to last. Smoke rolled low, no one coughed. They were saving breath for judgment. Colt Avery stepped from the dark like a man into his own shop, hat low, sleeves shoved, knuckles stained with iron dust. He looked at the beam, then at the people. "She don't sleep in there now," he said, level as a plumb line. Half the row flinched. The rest pretended they hadn't heard. Sheriff Jed Carver stood off to the side. "Who said it?" he asked. "In Coyote Bend, you don't call evil by name. You bury it or you burn it." Hank Sutter leaned on the store post. Deputy Tom Nix kept to the livery shade. Mayor Clyde Portis let the smoke do his talking. Prudence Hale whispered under a tight shawl. Ben Red Elk, Smith up the lane, gave Colt one slow nod. Doc Hattie Moran held a lamp and didn't step closer. A roof stringer sagged and dropped. Colt walked past the sheriff, past faces tight as rawhide. He set his palm on the scarred wood as if a pulse might hide there. Nora, a knife had set it. His thumb found the place the blade bit twice to square a corner. Someone careful, someone meaning it to hold. "Back off that, Avery," Nix called. "Let it burn clean." "Not yet," Colt said. "You fixing to tell me how we got here?" Jed asked. Colt looked from the beam to windows where curtains had stirred at a certain name, then never again. "I'm fixing to see it finished right," he said. "Decent," Hank said, "is knowing your place and keeping to it." Colt let his eyes rest on Hank until he swallowed. "She's got a place," Colt said. "It ain't a stall." The crowd murmured and settled when Jed raised a hand. "Fire's my concern if it touches law," he said. "So is the peace. You going to answer my ask, Colt?" "Soon," Colt said. Pitch popped like a small shot. He wiped soot from the first letter as if to prove a point only he and the wood understood. "Hear me," Jed said. "No one crosses this line." He marked the dust with his heel. "Barn burns, but nobody gets burned with it." "That'll do," Colt said. "You putting a halo on a girl who—" Hank began. Colt turned. The look he gave stopped what was left of Hank's mouth. He didn't raise a fist. He just held the man the way a smith holds hot stock and decides the shape. The deputy stared at his boots. "Whose idea was the knife?" someone asked. No one claimed it. The center roof let go and settled. The letters dulled. Colt watched until N faded to a seam. "Last time," Jed said. "Who said it? Who takes the weight for light and timber and whatever follows?" Colt let go of the beam and wiped his palm on his thigh. He could have said 3 words and been done. He didn't. He looked toward Doc Hattie's window, toward the well crank where a strip of blue ribbon had been tied by a hand that meant to hold ground. "I'll tell it," he said, "but not here." "Where then?" Jed asked. "Where it started," Colt said. 3 days back when the stage rolled in late. Jed measured the heat in the faces, then nodded once. "Now then." Colt stepped away. The wood hissed and settled. He didn't look back. He moved through the line and the line opened, the way iron parts when a hammer finds true. 3 days before the fire, the stage rolled in late. No one waited. The driver spat, dropped a carpetbag, and slapped dust from his gloves. Then she stepped down barefoot, dress torn, one strap hanging, sunburn across her shoulders, a dark mark on the jaw. Both knees scraped. She set her hand on the wheel like it was the last thing holding. "Get me out," she said, not loud, not to anyone. Millie Dugan watched from the telegraph window. Widow Alma Riggs stood in her livery door. Hank Sutter leaned on the storepost. Deputy Tom Nix kept to the hitchrail shade. Mayor Clyde Portis arranged his face into concern. Colt Avery stood by Ben Red Elk's shop with a length of pump rod on his shoulder. Windmill oil had left gray in his knuckles. He didn't move. Bare feet, torn cloth, the way she steadied before standing straight. That told enough. He set the rod down. Doc Hattie Moran came quick and quiet, lamp glass warm in her hand. She didn't ask questions. Her palm hovered an inch from the bruise, measuring heat without touching. "Come with me, honey." She opened her door and made a room where no eyes could trespass. The woman went in without looking left or right. "What's her name?" Hank said. "None of yours," Ben said. Colt kept clear of Doc's step. A decent thing can be ruined by one step too close. On Millie's counter, the key tapped. A wire from Silver Spur came in with words that didn't fit a small office. "Writ draft, private, stop. Hold subject pending retrieval, stop. Initials TN. Millie copied it for her ledger and slid both under the blotter. After sundown, Tom Nix drifted past Doc Hattie's door and tested the latch with his eye, not his hand. The lamplight dimmed, then steadied. He moved on. Portis took a slow turn of the boardwalk and counted windows like a man taking stock. Colt ate standing up, cold beans and a heel of bread. He lay awake while the town went quiet. In the next room, windmill parts waited like chores a man owes to neighbors. Twice he reached for his bridle and set it back. Restraint can feel like hauling a full water barrel uphill. "Get me out." He listened, heard only stove iron ticking as it cooled. At dawn, he rode the long fence to keep from riding past docks. By noon, the town was awake enough to pretend it always had business. Millie pressed the wire flat and told herself she didn't know what TN meant, then told herself she did. Doc Hattie opened her door at last. The woman stepped out in the same dress, washed poor, dried quick, hair combed. The bruise had gone from wine to plums, bare feet gone. Alma had found slippers that didn't match. She made 3 steps and steadied on the porch post before she went on. Colt kept from being the first face she'd meet. He studied nailheads in Ben's bench like they had sums to do. When he finally looked up, she glanced his way the way a person checks a compass. No more than that, enough. He set the tong down. There was plenty 2 men could say. Neither said it. That night the town slept like it had made a choice. Colt lay awake and knew it hadn't. Near morning he understood the next move was his, small enough not to scare her, large enough to matter. On the 3rd night, Colt Avery walked the back lane with nothing but a bundle in his hands. He had baked the bread himself, the way he always did when the forge cooled and the house felt too empty. It wasn't much, rough crust, rag for wrapping, but it was warm. He added a peach from the tree that leaned against the barn. It was soft, bruised, not fit for trade, but sweeter for being his own. He set both on the sill of Doc Hattie's window, careful not to make a sound. He had turned to leave when a voice came through the shutter, not sharp, not pleading, just worn. "You bringing that for your turn?" He stopped. The street was quiet, except for the hiss of the forge settling behind him. He didn't answer. "That's why they leave things," she said. "Men always come for what's owed." Colt didn't look back. He walked away with his hands empty, boots grinding gravel like he meant to grind the words into dust. At dawn the sill was bare, but on the bench at his forge lay a strip of blue calico, folded once, frayed at the edges, left where he'd be sure to see it. He picked it up and turned it over in his palm. A ribbon, worn thin, carrying more weight than cloth should carry. Ben Red Elk stepped from his smithy next door. He saw Colt holding it but didn't ask. Men like them knew when silence was the better language. That evening Colt drew a cup of water at the well and walked it to the porch. She sat on the steps, knees drawn up, eyes fixed past him. He held the tin out. For a moment she didn't move. Then she asked, soft as wind through chaff, "Why don't you ask me?" "Would you want to tell it?" Colt said. Her gaze slipped away. She took the cup and drank. The question hung in the air like iron cooling slow, but she left it unanswered. Sometimes not telling was the only way a body stayed upright. Later, Colt circled back by the well. On the crank handle hung another ribbon, the same calico tied loose so it would be noticed but not claimed. He touched it once with a fingertip, then let it hang. As he crossed the street, Prudence Hale passed with her shawl tight and her chin higher than it needed to be. "Girl like that shouldn't sit where decent folks pass," she muttered loud enough to sting. Colt heard it from the forge. He didn't raise his head, but the next hammer blow fell hard enough to bend the bar wrong. Ben glanced over. Colt set the hammer down and didn't pick it up again for a long while. That night he sat by the lamp with the ribbon folded on his bench. The forge smelled of iron, the bread gone from his house, the peach gone too. He thought of the way her voice had carried no fear, only a tired knowing. Bread meant debt in her world, kindness meant a cost. Colt ran the ribbon between thumb and forefinger. He didn't pocket it. Some things weren't for keeping. He left it by the lamp, where its presence filled the room more than words could. He leaned back in the chair, staring at the rafters, and knew one thing clear. For her to believe a man could give without taking would take more than bread. It would take time and him showing up again and again until silence itself grew into trust. By the fourth evening, the town had settled back into its habits. Men on porches with cigars, women hurrying past with baskets, boys kicking dust where they shouldn't. But Colt Avery carried a tin cup filled from the well and walked it steady across the street. He didn't knock on Doc Hattie's door. He found her there instead, sitting on the step with her knees drawn close, eyes on the ground. He set the cup down within her reach. She looked at it, then at him. "Why don't you ask me?" Colt stood a moment, hammer-calloused hands resting at his sides. "Would you want to tell it?" She didn't answer. Her hand closed around the cup. She drank slow, and he turned back toward the forge. The question hung behind him, but the silence that followed was stronger. Later that night, when the lanterns dimmed, he found a second strip of calico tied to the crank handle of the well. It swayed in the faint wind, a ribbon faded from blue to gray with age. Colt touched it with his thumb and let it be. He understood it for what it was, a line drawn, a choice left to her. Prudence Hale came striding past at dusk, heels hard on the boards, shawl clutched like armor. She paused just long enough to let her words cut. No dignity left in a girl who sits where decent folk have to see her. She didn't lower her voice. She wanted it heard. Colt lifted his head from the anvil when the words reached him. He didn't speak back. He swung the hammer once, harder than needed, flattening the iron in a single blow that warped the bar beyond use. Ben Red Elk glanced over from his own forge and said nothing. They both knew what the sound meant. Sheriff Jed Carver passed through town the next morning, his eyes sharper than usual, his stride unhurried but certain. He nodded at Colt, then at Doc's shuttered window, and kept walking. By sundown, Nora Vale sat on the porch again, not close enough to invite, not far enough to hide. Colt crossed between forge and well, gave her one short nod, the same as always. She didn't return it, but she didn't turn away either. That night Colt lay in his bed staring at the ceiling rafters, hearing the echo of her voice. "Why don't you ask me?" He thought of how she hadn't flinched when he gave her water, how she'd chosen silence not out of fear but to hold herself together. He turned the faded ribbon over in his palm once, then set it on the table beside his lamp. Some men take strength from words, others from the work of their hands. Colt knew hers would come from the space he gave her, space enough to drink without debt, to sit without shame, to stay upright, without telling more than she owed. When morning came, the ribbon still hung at the well, and Colt let it hang. Some truths belonged to her, and she had the right to keep them. By the fifth evening, the town had taken her presence for granted. Nora Vale sat on the porch step outside Doc Hattie's, as she had each dusk, shoulders narrow against the doorframe. She said little, looked at no one. A ribbon still hung loose at the well, faded blue, swaying when wagons passed. That's when the boys came. Not men yet, just rough edges and beer on their breath. Tim Bruckner, Cole Liddy, Moss Carter. They lingered by the fence rail, laughing too loud at nothing. The kind of laughter that bends toward cruelty. Cole pitched an apple core. It hit the dirt by Nora's bare foot with a dull thump. She didn't move. She sat straight, eyes forward, hands folded tight in her lap. "Broken toys are easy to borrow," Tim said. His grin was shallow, his eyes mean. Moss pretended to trip and brushed the hem of her skirt with his fingers. The three of them laughed as if it were a game. Nora didn't flinch. That stillness held more weight than a slap might have. Then Colt Avery came around the corner of the forge. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He only walked, each step heavy as an anvil set on wood. He stopped a few yards away and looked at them. Not a glare, not a scowl, just a long, steady look. The boys felt it before they understood it. Colt's eyes were the eyes of a man who had once fought wolves, who had faced worse nights than theirs. He didn't need to raise his voice. The silence around him did the work. Tim swallowed first. Cole kicked at the dust. Moss dropped his grin and muttered something no one caught. They backed away, not running, but not walking proud either. Colt stayed where he was. When they'd gone far enough, he turned to Nora. She hadn't moved the whole time. She looked at him once, just once, then back at her hands. That was all. After dark, Colt walked past Doc Hattie's again. The street was quiet. Lamps, dim. On the fence post by the side step, he saw it. Another strip of calico ribbon, tied loose with a small coin knotted inside. A penny, old and worn, edges dark with oil. He didn't untie it. He only laid his hand on the post beside it and stood there a long moment. Maybe it was thanks. Maybe it was something else. Either way, it was a sign that she had noticed, and that was enough. The ribbon fluttered faint in the night breeze. Colt left it hanging and walked back to the forge. He carried the weight of that penny in his mind all the way home. Some stories don't shout when they start to burn. Sometimes it's in the look a man gives when no one else dares to stand. Sunday carried the heat like a curse. The street lay quiet until Nora Vale stepped out of Doc Hattie's door. Same dress, washed thin, mended in places that wouldn't hold long. She made her way toward the general store, 10 steps from the porch, but far enough for trouble to notice. Hank Sutter leaned on the rail out front, boot hooked, chewing slow. When he saw her, his grin spread like rot. "Miss Vale," he said, tipping an empty hand as though it were a hat. She kept walking, eyes forward, slippers scuffing. He moved quick, caught her arm and yanked hard enough to stagger her. "What's the rush, darling? Thought you liked attention." The crack of the slap came first. Not hers. His backhand caught her cheek, dropping her in the dust. People gasped but didn't move. Then Colt Avery came out of the blacksmith shop. Not rushing, marching, like each step burned the boards beneath him. He didn't ask, didn't shout. He closed the distance and drove one punch straight into Hank's jaw. The sound was clean. Hank fell against the rail, spit and blood staining his lip. Colt dragged him up by the shirt and slammed him against the post. His voice never rose. "Touch her again, and I'll bury your hand behind the barn." Hank blinked, blood running from the corner of his mouth. For once, he had no words. He stumbled off, holding his jaw, the grin gone. Folks scattered, eyes on the ground. Nora pushed herself up slow, palm against her cheek. She didn't look at Colt, didn't thank him. She walked back to Doc's door and disappeared inside. That evening, Colt found something waiting on the forge table. A ribbon again, but this one was different. The ends were burned, edges blackened, tied into a bow, tight as a knot in a rope. He held it in his palm, the smell of char still on it. Ben Red Elk came by, saw the ribbon, and met Colt's eyes. He nodded once, Same way men mark something too heavy for speech. Colt tucked the bow into his back pocket, not to claim it but to carry the weight of it. Smoke from the fight still clung to the town, even after Hank limped home. By nightfall, talk had spread, not about Nora's past, but about the man who struck Hank Sutter in front of everyone. Some said it was foolish, others said it was about time. Colt said nothing. He sat by his lamp, the burned ribbon on the table beside him. Some things you didn't explain. You kept them where they could remind you what mattered and what was coming next. Word of the punch moved through town with boots on. By morning the heat had cooled, but eyes still found Colt Avery and slid away quick. Hank Sutter kept home with a rag at his jaw. Deputy Tom Nix walked slower than usual, making sure folks noticed his hands on his belt. Mayor Clyde Portis practiced concern on anyone who'd stand still for it. Colt let the anvil talk. Toward dusk, he carried a small plate to Doc Hattie's door, 2 slices of cornbread, a boiled egg, a napkin with one clean word, Nora. He set it down and left without knocking. No bargain under the food, no string in the ink. Night ran long. The burned ribbon lay on his table, char like a line drawn and kept. Sleep came in pieces. At first light, the plate was gone. In its place sat a white mother-of-pearl button, dull with wear. Not new, not precious. The kind sewn onto a dress mended too often. One edge had a nick, clean, as if scraped against rough board. He didn't smile, but something in him eased. Ben Red Elk saw the button and raised his brows. Colt shook his head once. Not a trophy, a message. He set it on the bench where he'd see it each time he reached for the hammer. Doc Hattie came mid-morning. "I wrote the sheriff," she said. "She stays with me under my say. If anyone claims her, they do it in front of the law." "Good," Colt said. "Good isn't enough," Doc said. "If Tom Nix brings paper stamped by Portis, it'll scare half this town." "Paper don't make a thing right." "No," she said. "It makes cowards obedient." Millie Dugan stopped by with horseshoe nails she didn't need. Her eyes flicked to the button. Silver Spur sent a wire, draft writ, private, initials TN. I didn't pass it around. "You did right," Colt said. "I did scared," she said, and left. By late afternoon, Nora sat on the step again. Colt crossed from forge to well, gave her that one nod. She didn't return it, but her shoulders looked looser. That was plenty. Toward evening, Hank showed his face, slow and mean, holding a grudge like hot iron. He stood in the store door and let his eyes rest where they shouldn't. Colt's jaw tightened, then eased. Not tonight. Sheriff Jed Carver made his rounds. "There's a right way through this," he said to whoever needed to hear it. "We'll take that way." "Portis will take a shortcut," Ben murmured. "Then we don't," Colt said. When lamps were lit, Colt slipped the button in his pocket, not to keep but to carry. He ate his poor supper, cold beans and a heel of bread, then left a second plate on Doc's sill, half an apple and more cornbread. The napkin corner held the same single word, Nora. A shadow slid from the livery. Tom Nix, hands hooked in his belt. He watched Colt a beat too long, clicked his tongue, and moved on. Colt stood in the doorway until the deputy's boots went quiet. Then he set the button on his lamp base and turned the flame low. No speeches, no promises. The night passed without incident. That itself felt like an incident. At dawn, the plate was gone. In its place lay another button, twin to the first except for a different nick. 2 pieces from the same string. Colt set them side by side and saw the match clear. He closed his hand around both and felt the weight they didn't have. Then he put them back where the light could find them and went to work. They came after sundown, 4 riders with lamps, dark, Hank Sutter, 2 of his beer-strong boys, and a drifter. Colt Avery and Ben Red Elk had strung a bell line from the windmill to the front gate, set 2 trip ropes across the lane, and leaned a stock tank on sawhorses, meant to scare and slow, not break bone. "No shots," Colt said. "Law first," Ben answered. The first horse nosed the gate. The bell chimed once. Hank swung down to lift the latch. "Leave it," Colt said, stepping from the pump-house shadow. "You think a string and a bell makes you a judge," Hank said. "It makes me awake," Colt said. Hank shoved the gate. The trip rope took his boot. He grabbed the rail, tipped the tank, and a sheet of cold water flattened him and the drifter. Horses jumped. The second rope sent Tim Bruckner to his knees. Ben moved clean. He kicked pistols toward Colt, slipped hitches, and had the reins before the boys found their feet. Colt hauled Hank clear by the collar. "Stay down." "You gonna beat me again, hero," Hank spat. "No, you're going to wait," Colt said. The bell kept talking, clang, then quiet. Sheriff Jed Carver rode in with 2 townsmen. He took in the water, ropes, and pistols in a pile. "Good evening," he said. "Line 'em." Ben and Colt stood the boys and turned out pockets. Knives clinked into Jed's hat, a roll of bills, pennies slick with oil. "Chew." Hank tried to square his shoulders and failed. "Anybody hurt?" Jed asked. "Only pride," Colt said. "Pride heals," Jed said. He patted Hank down and brought up a white mother-of-pearl button, dull with a nick under the 2 o'clock hole. "Lose this somewhere?" he asked. Hank shut his mouth. Colt took the twin Nora had left on his sill and held it up. Same size, same nick. Jed wrapped the found button in his handkerchief. "You keep yours," he told Colt. "I'll keep this. The guns go to lockup. You got no cause," Tim muttered. "Night trespass is cause," Jed said. "She ain't yours," Hank told Colt. "She ain't yours either," Colt said. They tied wrists with harness leather. Ben led the horses to Widow Alma's pen, talking to them soft, the way he cooled hot iron. The drifter tried for swagger and came up short. Jed looked at the tank and the ropes. "You could have sprung steel jaws," he said. "Buckets work," Colt said. "They do," Jed said. On the way out, a second button clicked from Hank's trouser cuff, skittered to Ben's boot. Same pearly face, same nick. Ben passed it to Jed without a word. Jed told the handful who had drifted in, "Go home. Tomorrow on the boardwalk we speak under daylight. Tonight the law sleeps with both eyes open." The crowd broke. Ben reset the bell line. Colt coiled rope and wiped mud from his hands on burlap. The yard went back to size. Nora's window stayed dark. Jed mounted. "Porch, noon," he said. "Bring what you've got." "I'll bring it," Colt said. Hank jerked against the leather. "You think you're a saint because you punch straight and don't steal?" "I want a town that doesn't look away," Colt said. Jed led them toward the jail. The bell gave one small note. Ben stood with Colt a moment. "You're not sleeping much," Ben said. "Enough," Colt said. "Tomorrow," Ben said. "Tomorrow," Colt answered. They doused the pump-house lamp. Law had come and gone without a shot. Sometimes that's the hardest way, and the only one worth the trouble. By noon, the boardwalk filled. Sheriff Jed Carver stood on Colt Avery's porch with a ledger and his badge at his heart. Doc Hattie waited by the rail. Millie Dugan held her notebook. Widow Alma gripped a broom. Ben read elk and Colt set a scorched crossbeam on 2 sawhorses. The word cut in it had lived through the fire. Nora. Jed tapped the wood. "We speak plain, no shouting, no rushing talk ahead of truth." He looked at the crowd, then at Hank Sutter, jaw wrapped. Deputy Tom Nix leaned in the shade, hands on his belt. Mayor Clyde Portis wore clean concern. Doc Hattie said, "You don't decide whose pain is tidy." Jed nodded to Colt. "Show what you've got." Colt opened a cloth, a mother-of-pearl button with a nick under the 2 o'clock hole. He set it beside the twin Jed took off Hank. "You can buy a dozen like that," Hank said. "Maybe," Jed said, "not with the same scar. 2 halves from 1 seam. 1 left on a plate at Doc Hattie's, 1 in Hank Sutter's pocket while he lurked at night. Millie raised a slip. Wire from Silver Spur. Writ draft. Private. Hold subject pending retrieval. Initials TN. Your initials aren't a judge, Tom. Law first, Jed said, not after. Ben put a cold chisel to the first letter, tapping till char sloughed off. The steel struck dull. He pinched out a penny, black with oil. Tallow and axle, he said. Sutter pay smells like this. A penny's a penny, Hank muttered. Series mark, Ben said. Same as your roll last month. Jed wrapped the coin. We have a name cut with a knife, a coin in the cut, a button from the dress she wore off the stage, a second button from a man who means her harm, a wire that pretends to be law and is not. The shame was cut into wood, Colt said. It was meant to be seen. Doc Hattie stood to Nora's shoulder. She owes no tale to the street. If she tells me it's for a courtroom, not your porches. Nora's voice was small but steady. I'm standing. That's all today. That's enough, Jed said. Ben turned the beam and lifted more ash. No more coins. He wiped the groove clean and set the penny back. Whoever seated it meant someone to find it. Eyes went from Nix to Portis. Jed drew a line with his heel. From sundown till after church tomorrow, no one goes near Doc Hattie's door unless she asks. The beam rides with me. The buttons stay split. The penny rides my pocket. Test this line and sleep where we keep drunks. We're done. The crowd let out a breath. Some left quick. Some lingered, staring at the word darkened by handling. Nora. It no longer looked like a brand. It looked like proof. Colt and Ben lifted the beam into Jed's wagon. Millie tucked her book. Widow Alma swept once, slow, like clearing a threshold. Hank leaned to Nix. Tonight, he hissed. Nix didn't answer. Portis tipped his hat to no one and walked off like a man late to supper. Colt caught Nora's eye, one nod. She gave him a small tilt in return and went inside with Doc, the door pulling shut soft as a promise not ready for words. Jed took the reins. Half the fights are won by daylight, he said. The other half get mean when the moon helps. He rolled away with the beam and the law aboard. Ben stood with Colt and listened to the street go thin. Bell line still up? It is, Colt said. Good, Ben said. We'll want it. The moon came up thin. Doc Hattie's porch sat quiet. A blue ribbon hung on the well crank. Sheriff Jed Carver took the rail. Colt Avery and Ben Red Elk kept to opposite corners with hooded lanterns. One knock for trouble. They came from the livery. Hank Sutter with his jaw bound. Two boys the same drifter, and Deputy Tom Nix walking like a man with paper. Mayor Clyde Portis drifted behind them, careful as ever. Nix raised a folded sheet. Writ of retrieval. Stand aside. Jed didn't touch it. Judge in Silver Spur says no writ bears your letters. The only paper tonight is my say. He drew a line with his heel. No one crosses this board. Hank laughed, then winced. You can't pen the street, Sheriff. I can pen men, Jed said. Doc Hattie opened her door a hand's width. She's under my care. Touch that latch and you do it in front of the law. Nora Vale stood a step back with her shawl. She didn't look away. Portis said, Town needs quiet. Town needs spine, Ben said. Nix flicked his chin. The drifter moved for the step. Colt tapped his lantern hood twice, then once. Two townsmen stepped from behind the barrels with plank shields. Ben's bell line, tin cups on a rope, rang when the drifter hit it. Curtains stirred. Voices woke behind walls. Men behaved different with witnesses. Back off, Jed said. Hank set a boot on the step. Colt stood where a man would have to go through him to climb. Hank looked at Colt's knuckles and shifted back to dirt. You two going to stand here till dawn, Nix said. Longer, Jed said. Millie Dugan came with a wire. Jed read it. Marshal Ezra Hale en route at first light. Hold the peace. Marshal, Portis said. We don't need federal boots for local dust. You brought the dust, Doc said. Nix folded his paper. All right, he told Hank. We'll wait. Not here you won't, Jed said. Street clears. Now. They went. Slow. Portis paused at the edge of light. Humiliate the town, Sheriff, and it will return the favor. Jed waited till the last heel scraped off. The porch eased. He nodded to the townsmen. Leave the planks. 2 short, 1 long if they circle back. Nora stepped out with something small in her fist. She tied it to the post quick, the same calico bow, edges charred. She pressed the knot once. You sure? Colt asked. I'm sure, she said. You don't owe a word, Jed said. I'm standing, she said. Ben eased the bell line loose and coiled it. Tin cups did their work, he said. We'll run them again if we must. Millie tucked the wire away. Sunup, she said, like a promise already on the road. Doc guided Nora in. The door closed soft. Jed faced Colt. Tomorrow we read the rest. Tonight we guard what we bought with our breath. I'll sit the pump house, Colt said. I'll walk, Ben said. They took turns under the thin moon. Twice a drunk veered close and found another way home. Near midnight a shape paused at the far corner, hat brim, narrow shoulders. Portis watched, then faded. Before dawn the street went so quiet Colt could hear the wick nibble oil. He checked the bow, still warm from a woman's hand. He touched the knot with 2 fingers. It'll hold, Ben said. It will, Colt said. Hoofbeats sounded. Jed stepped into the street and squared his hat. That'll be Marshal Hale, he said. Let's finish what we started. Marshal Ezra Hale rode in at first light. Sheriff Jed Carver met him in the street. Colt Avery, Ben Red Elk, Doc Hattie, and Millie Dugan stood by. Jed set the scorched crossbeam on sawhorses. The word was there like a scar, Nora. The penny lay wrapped in linen. 2 mother-of-pearl buttons sat side by side, twins with different nicks. The burned calico bow hung on the porch post. We use our eyes first, the marshal said. Ben touched the groove with a file. Narrow carpenter's knife, blade set shallow, right-hander. See the squared corner. Bit twice, not swept. Same habit I saw when I fixed Mayor Portis's porch. He trims inward with a nicked blade. Portis stood tidy in the crowd. You're a smith, Ben, not a judge of hands. I'm a judge of steel, Ben said. Men leave steel behind. Millie handed Jed a wire. Clerk at Silver Spur confirms. No writ issued. Town seal borrowed for private letters. Deputy Tom Nix smiled thin. Borrowed isn't stolen. Borrowed authority is stolen, the marshal said. Doc Hattie stood with Nora. You owe no story. Nora nodded. I'm not telling it, but I'll tell this. I pushed the penny in when I saw my name on the wood, so someone would know I was real. Jed lifted the wrapped button. Found on Hank. Its mate left on a plate at Doc's. Ben scraped again and teased out a tiny flake of metal. He set it on a white card. Blade burr, nicked steel. The marshal faced Portis. Your knife. Portis hesitated, then passed a neat folder. Hale opened it and found a notch near the point. He pressed the burr to it. The speck seated. Mayor Clyde Portis, Hale said. You're under arrest for fraud, intimidation, and conspiracy to disturb the peace. He turned. Deputy Tom Nix for falsifying process. Nix's hands went to his belt. Jed caught one wrist. A shout rose from the back. Bodies shifted. Hank shouldered a crate. Nails spilled. In the jostle, Nix tore free and ran. Portis slid behind 2 men, reached a gray gelding, and swung up. You embarrass the town, Portis called, heels already moving. The town embarrassed itself when it looked away, Hale said, but Portis was gone, Nix pounding after him. From the edge, Tim Bruckner yelled, They've got horses at Dry Arroyo. They took the pay ledger. They said south if it went bad. Names, Jed snapped. Portis's hired hand and the drifter, Tim said. Hale's jaw set. Jed. On it, Jed said. He told Doc, keep the door. Millie, file that wire. Ben, Colt, ride. Doc touched Nora's sleeve. You can stand without chasing men. I know, Nora said. I'm still standing. Hale dipped his hat to her, mounted. Jed mounted. Colt checked his cinch and touched the burned bow knot with 2 fingers. Hold the porch, he told Ben. I'll hold it, Ben said, till you bring back what was stolen. They trotted out. The town shifted like a man waking from a mean dream. Ahead, the arroyo cut the land into choices. You ready? Jed asked. Since the night I saw smoke, Colt said. We take them alive if they let us, Hale said. If they don't, Jed asked. We still try, Hale answered. They dropped toward dry arroyo where water had once run and men were running now. The morning had no music, only tack clicks and the breath of 3 riders who had decided what side they were on. They rode south in file. Marshal Ezra Hale, Sheriff Jed Carver, Colt Avery. 2 sets of prints dropped off the ridge, hurried and light on the bit. Portis and Tom Nix were running for the bend where strays get penned. Track split, Jed said. Portis takes the shelf. Nix drops the wash. We ease them into one place, Hale said. They reached a shallow basin. A dead mesquite lay across the cut, a rope drawn tight from trunk to bank. Colt reined in. Trip line, he said, Hank's style. Leave it, Jed said. Let it talk. Hoofbeats came thin, then close. Nix drove a bay into the wash, hat low. The bay hit the rope and folded. Nix flew, skidded, grabbed for his pistol. Hale set a boot on the gun. Hands. You ain't got cause, Nix said. Counterfeit writ, night stalk. Resisting, Jed said, tying wrists with latigo. Where's Portis? Nix jerked his chin toward the shelf. Iron sang on stone. Portis's gray took the shelf too fast. The off-billet tore where sweat had rotted it thin. Saddle rolled. Portis pitched into scrub, hat rolling like a coin. Colt had him before he found his feet. Easy, he said, pulling him clear. Jed tied off the gray. Hale pulled a black ledger from the saddlebag, blue twine around it. Misunderstanding, Portis said. What's misunderstood is care, Hale said. He opened the ledger. Payroll tallies, names, dates, series marks, pennies issued off the ranch roll. A margin note in a neat hand. Nora, mark the stall, knife. Jed closed the book like a man catching a snake head first. You'll hang this on clerks and call it error? He asked. Portis went gray. Drag me through the street and you'll have trouble you can't pen. Hale turned to Nix. You wrote the wire. I drafted it, Nix said. Judge would have signed. Judge says otherwise, Hale said, taking Nix by the arm. The deputy stopped fighting when Colt stepped close. They headed back slow, leaving the rope. Hale set Nix on the bay with hands tied to the horn. Jed walked the gray. At the narrows, Colt crouched. A round hoofprint with a notch where a nail was missing. Hank's sorrel. The cut matched what Ben pointed out last night. Hank set the rope to catch someone and snared his own. Good, Hale said. Saves us a sermon. Coyote Bend lay small and waiting. Hale said, Nix, if you've got a clean word left, use it. Nix looked at town. Portis paid, said keep the street quiet, said her name would fade if nobody spoke it. Names don't fade, Jed said. They cut, they wait. They came in by the livery. Widow Alma swung the gate. Millie Dugan stood with a wire. Jed passed her the ledger. Stamp and copy, lock the rest. Doc Hattie stepped out. She looked at rope marks on Nix's wrists, dust on Portis's coat, then at Colt. All right? I'm standing, he said. Nora stood behind Doc. She didn't step forward or back. Hale turned. Book them, he told Jed. Colt, sleep if you can. Tomorrow is court. Colt touched the charred bow on the post with 2 fingers. The knot held. In the office, Jed set the ledger in the drawer and turned the key. We'll let daylight say the rest, he said. Daylight, Hale said, and a judge who reads. They took the early wagon to Silver Spur. Marshal Ezra Hale set Clyde Portis at the left table, wrists bound. Deputy Tom Nix sat beside him with his badge off. Sheriff Jed Carver laid a scorched crossbeam on 2 sawhorses. The word faced the room, Nora. The judge came in. "Territory versus Portis and Nix," he said. "Fraud, intimidation, false process, disturbing the peace. We'll do this straight." Jed set a wrapped penny, 2 mother-of-pearl buttons, and Millie Dugan's wires on the clerk's table. Doc Hattie sat with Nora behind the rail. Colt Avery stood at the back. "Chain," the judge said. Jed told where the beam was found, who handled it, when he lifted the penny from the cut, when he took a button from Hank Sutter's pocket, how its twin had been left at Doc Hattie's sill. Millie read the first wire. "Writ draft, private, hold subject pending retrieval, initials TN." She read the second, the clerk denying any writ. "I kept copies," she said. "Paper vanishes when folks want quiet more than right." Ben Red Elk said what Steele says. "Narrow carpenter's knife, right-hand cut, squared corners. Burr from a nicked point lodged in the grain." Hale held up Portis's knife, the burr seated like a tooth in its own jaw. "Circumstance," Portis said. "Pattern," Hale said. Nix lifted his chin. "I drafted a writ to prepare the peace. Clerk's lag. I meant order." "You meant to scare a town into silence," the judge said. "Sit." Hale told how they found Nix in the wash and Portis on the shelf. Saddle rolled from a rotten billet, ledger in the bag. He opened to a margin note. "Nora, mark the stall, knife." Doc Hattie rose. "Your Honor, she owes no detail to the room." "She owes none," the judge said. He looked to Nora. "You may remain silent, or give only what you will." Nora stood. "I saw my name cut where no person belongs," she said. "I set a penny in the cut so someone would find me. I am standing now. That is what I have today." "That will do," the judge said. He faced the defendants. "Flight, false paper, a scheme to brand a living woman, with wood and rumor. There is probable cause and then some." He took Portis's seal and set it in a drawer. "You are relieved of office. The deputy's commission is revoked." He tore a page and gave it to the bailiff. "Remand without bail." Nix started to talk. Hale's hand ended it. Portis tried for tone. "You make a spectacle of decency. The town will sour." "The town is not my client," the judge said. "The law is." He signed a protective order. "No one approaches Doc Hattie's door without her say." He looked at Jed. "Hold the beam until trial. When its use is finished, return it to the rightful hand." "Whose?" Jed asked. "The hand that never used it as a cage," the judge said. Hale shook Jed's hand. Millie slid the stamps into her book. Ben shouldered the beam. Doc Hattie gave Colt a look that asked nothing and answered enough. Nora walked beside them, upright. At the wagon, Colt touched the burned bow on the post. The knot held. "You all right?" he asked. "I'm standing," Nora said. Jed took the reins. "Home," he said. "One more thing to finish." They rolled out with the beam and the law toward a town fresh out of places to look away. They reached Coyote Bend at sundown with the beam across Jed Carver's wagon. Jed back to Colt Avery's porch. Ben Red Elk and Colt slid the crossbeam onto sawhorses. The scar spoke for itself. "Nora," Jed set a palm on the wood. "Its work is done," he said. Doc Hattie stood with Nora in the doorway. Nora looked, then came forward and set 2 fingers on the first letter. "It doesn't own me." Ben fetched a handsaw and a file. "You say the word," he told her. "Fire or cut it free." Nora met Colt's eyes like checking a compass. "Cut it free," she said. Ben chalked a thin line, sawed slow, filed smooth, rubbed oil, bored a hole with a nail warmed in Colt's fire, and threaded a rawhide thong. He set the small plank oval in Nora's hand. The letters were not proud, only true. "Keep it or throw it in," Ben said. "Either way is yours." Nora took the burned calico bough from the post and knotted its charred ends along the thong. She hung the piece at her throat. I'll keep it, not to honor the stall. To mark that I walked out. The rest, Jed asked. Nora nodded. Colt and Ben carried the beam into the yard. Jed struck a match. They fed flame the wood that had once held a lie. It burned down, no cheering. When the last ember sank, the yard felt larger. Widow Alma set 2 cups on the rail and left. Jed tipped his hat. If any man asks, he said, tell him we counted truth out loud. He rolled the wagon away. Doc Hattie touched Nora's shoulder. My door stays open. Your voice stays yours. I know, Nora said. She looked at Colt. You still walk between the forge and the well? Every day. Good. Then I'll sit where I can see you pass. They didn't make a promise they couldn't keep. They kept the one they already had. Showing up. Later, when lamps were low, Colt set a tin cup on the step where she could reach without rising. He sat beside her, elbows on his knees, their shoulders touched. 2 mother-of-pearl buttons lay on the rail. Nora tied them to the rawhide with a small knot, then cut one free and slid it across. For your pocket, she said. He took it. I'll keep it where I can feel it when I'm about to make a bad choice. That'll do, she said. Ben tapped the windmill rope once. The bell answered and kept still, like a town remembering how to sleep. Tell me if you want the ash hauled, Colt said. Leave some, Nora said. Let it be a patch where nothing grows a while. It'll remind me I don't have to plant over everything. They sat. A dog barked twice and quit. The night went on without asking for anything. When Nora rose, she looked at the doorway, then at the pendant, then at Colt. I'm standing. I plan to keep on. I'll be here at first light, he said. Pump needs oil. Hinges, too. All right, she said, and went in with her hand on the plank oval, like a woman shutting a gate she now has the key to. Colt stayed, touching the button in his pocket and the rail where 2 cups had stood. He looked at the place where the beam had burned and saw nothing grand, just ground, ready to be what ground is. In Coyote Bend, they used to say, don't call a thing by its right name. Tonight, they called it, then let it go. On the porch, 2 pairs of boots scuffed the same board, and nobody had to look away, and so the dust of that day settled. The jailhouse whisper was gone, but its echo lingered, teaching a lonely rancher and a weary town that shame only loses when truth is spoken out loud. If this story rode alongside your heart, I'd be grateful to hear your thoughts down below. Just a word, or even a number, is enough to let me know you were here. Stories like this live longer when they're shared, and I'd be honored to share the trail with you again on the next ride.